Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. Today's episode comes to you courtesy of my amazing patrons. Once a month, patrons vote on what commander that they'd like to see in an upcoming episode. The commander that gets the most votes wins. And the commander that got the most votes this month was Toxrill the Corrosive. Toxrill is a 7/7 slug horror that costs 5 black. Toxrill has at the beginning of each end step put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. And whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. And finally, by paying blue-black, you can sacrifice a slug to draw a card. Toxrill is an incredibly powerful commander that, if left unchecked, it can just dominate the board pretty much on its own. Those slime counters are dished out on every single upkeep, not just your own, so your opponent's creatures are going to get incredibly tiny or incredibly dead in absolutely no time. And when your opponent's creatures do die, you're going to make an army of slugs in absolutely no time, and yeah, you can sacrifice those slugs to draw even more cards if you want. Because of the powerful nature of this commander and the fact that it can take over the board very quickly if it's not dealt with, do not be surprised if you've got a target on your back pretty quickly with this one. But of course, we've got plenty of ways to protect Toxrill and to make Toxrill even more effective. Also, as a side note, keep in mind that every single card in this deck outside of the commander is less than $1. And now with all that said, let's jump into some cards that can really help this commander out. And the first card I want to bring up is actually the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Sludge Monster. Sludge Monster is a 5/5 horror that costs 3 blue. It has, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, put a slime counter on up to one other target creature. And non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 2/2. Sludge Monster is actually the only other card in Magic, to my knowledge, that actually interacts with slime counters and getting them on creatures. And this card is absolutely incredible in combination with Toxrill. Again, on every single upkeep, Toxrill is going to put a slime counter on every single one of our opponent's creatures. And with the Sludge Monster in play, their creatures are just going to be 2/2s that have absolutely no abilities. So we only need 2 slime counters on every single one of our opponent's creatures to take them out. And yeah, that takes absolutely no time in a game of Commander where we've got multiple opponents and multiple turns before our own. Essentially with this and our commander in play, we just have to go to our end step and then the next opponent's end step, and then every creature on the board under our opponent's control at that point is going to be gone. Yeah, this is an absolutely devastating combination, and our opponents basically can't get any creatures into play when we have both of these in play, or they're just going to get taken out pretty much immediately. So for all those reasons, Sludge Monster is most definitely the Golden Pig of this deck. Regardless, of course, we also have other fantastic cards that work very well with Toxrill, with cards like Mass Diminish and Vedalken Humiliator. Mass Diminish says, until your next turn, creatures target player controls have base power and toughness 1/1, and we can flash it back. So with Toxrill in play, with just one slime counter on that opponent's creatures, their entire army is going to be wiped out. Speaking of which, Vedalken Humiliator has Metalcraft. When it attacks, if you control 3 or more artifacts, creatures your opponents control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn. So with just 3 artifacts in play, again in combination with Toxrill, this becomes a board wipe. And of course, keep in mind that we're going to be getting a ton of slugs whenever we take out our opponent's creatures. We also have ways to get even more slugs though with things like Clackbridge Troll and Genesis Chamber. Clackbridge Troll is an 8/8 with trample and haste, and when it enters the battlefield, target opponent's going to create 3/0/1 white goat creature tokens. So we can actually force an opponent to get some goats that we're going to be able to take out right at the end of the turn with Toxrill. And then Genesis Chamber can help us out in an even bigger way. It's an artifact that says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, if Genesis Chamber is untapped, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. So whenever our opponents have a non-token creature come into play, they are forced to make a mirror that is just going to die and basically give us a slug. Yeah, things can get out of control really quickly with Toxrill. And speaking of things getting out of control, we can make things go even quicker with those slime counters with some proliferate cards like Contentious Plan, Steady Progress, and Tezzeret's Gambit. Again, proliferating means that we can choose any number of permanents and or players and give each another counter of each kind already there. So we can essentially just add an extra slime counter onto anything that already has a slime counter. On top of that, Contentious Plan and Steady Progress are going to have us draw 1 card, and Tezzeret's Gambit has us draw 2. We also have some repeatable proliferate effects with things like Contagion Clasp and Flux Channeler. Contagion Clasp has when it enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and by paying 4 and tapping it, we can proliferate. And then Flux Channeler can be even more impactful, a 2/2 human wizard that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. So things can get really out of control with this in play. Just casting a couple of non-creature spells in a turn can get even more slime counters on our opponent's creatures and help take them out in absolutely no time. We also have some other creatures that can help us out with things like Thrumming Bird and Guildpact Informant. Thrumming Bird's going to proliferate whenever we deal combat damage to a player, and Guildpact Informant does the exact same thing, but it also includes Planeswalkers as well. Each of these have flying, so it's pretty easy for us to get through on at least one opponent to get even more slime counters on our opponent's creatures. But we also have some other benefits from getting through on some other cards. So we're also going to be running Curiosity Crafter, Reconnaissance Mission, and Deep Fathom Skulker. Curiosity Crafter has flying, and it says you have no maximum hand size, and whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Again, our commander can easily help us control the board and take our opponent's creatures out, and while doing so, make a ton of slug creature tokens that we can swing through with, and draw a lot of cards with Curiosity Crafter. And then Reconnaissance Mission says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and Deep Fathom Skulker does the exact same thing. So these can also benefit us when our non-token creatures deal combat damage to players as well. And again, with the number of creatures that we can make with Toxrill, we can draw an absurd amount of cards with each of these. But we can also draw cards with cards like Grazlex and Morbid Opportunist. Grazlex says whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, it may return to its owner's hand, and whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So this can draw some cards and protect some of our non-token creatures in combat as well. And then Morbid Opportunist says whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Again, during our opponent's turns, we're going to be taking out a lot of their creatures, so this can draw us a lot of cards throughout the game. But of course, we also have some more standard draw spells with cards like Sign in Blood, Read the Bones, Behold the Multiverse, Factor Fiction, and Epiphany the Drowned Yard. But now that we've talked about ways to dig deeper into our deck, what kinds of cards can help our army out even more? First up, let's start with Hall of Triumph. It says when it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1. These slug tokens that our commander makes might just be 1/1s to start off with, but this can essentially double up their power and toughness to make them even more threatening. Speaking of which, Dragon Throne of Tarkir can be absolutely absurd once we've got an army. It says equip creature as defender and pay 2, tap. Other creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn where X is this creature's power. Keep in mind that Toxrill is a 7/7, so by throwing this on Toxrill, it can pump our entire army by 7 and give them all trample too. So those are going to be some massive slugs that can wipe out our opponents in no time. But we can also make our slugs deadly in a different way with Archetype of Finality. It says creatures you control have Death Touch, creatures your opponents control lose Death Touch, and can't have or gain Death Touch. So even though our slug tokens might just be 1/1s, they are incredibly deadly, and if they take out a creature that has a slime counter on it, again we get another slug, which again is going to have Death Touch too. But we can also utilize our slugs in a different way with cards like Gin of Infinite Deceits, the Trickster, God's Heist, and Ledger Domain. Gin of Infinite Deceits has tap, exchange control of 2 target non-legendary creatures. You can't activate this ability during combat. So picture this, we tap this to give one of our opponents one of our slugs for one of their better creatures. Even if our opponent's creature has slime counters on it, when we take it though, our commander's not going to shrink it because we control it, not our opponents. And then at that end step, that slug creature that we gave our opponent is going to get a slime counter on it, and it's going to die, and we're going to get another slug creature. So we essentially trade our opponent nothing to gain control of their best creature. And we didn't really lose anything in the process either. So yeah, we're also going to be running the Trickster God's Heist, which its first lore counter says you may exchange control of 2 target creatures. Its second is you may exchange control of 2 target non-basic, non-creature permanents that share a card type. And its third lore counter is target player loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. And then Ledger Domain has exchange control of target artifact or creature and another target permanent that shares one of those types with it. Finally though, we're also going to be running Sudden Substitution, which is a fantastic card. It's got split second and it says exchange control of target non-creature spell and target creature, then this spell's controller may choose targets for it. So in the right situation, this can be a huge blowout card. One of the ways that we can utilize it is to steal an opponent's fantastic non-creature spell and also just give them a slug, which is going to die and make us another slug. But of course, we also have plenty of other ways to deal with our opponent's things. So we also have some other counter spells that we're going to be running in this deck with cards like Neutralize, Negate, Countersquall, and Wash Away. On top of that, of course, we've got some ways to protect our commander as well with cards like Blessing of Leeches and Gift of Doom. Blessing of Leeches has Flash, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep you lose 1 life, and by paying 0 we regenerate enchanted creature. 1 life per turn is a very small price to pay to be able to regenerate Toxrill whenever we want. And then we can actually cast Gift of Doom as a morph creature and then flip it up at any time by sacrificing another creature. An enchanted creature has Death Touch and Indestructible. Death Touch is nice on Toxrill, but Indestructibility is really what we care about. Moving on though, we've got more ways to protect Toxrill with cards like Giant's Amulet, Mask of Avacyn, and Nurok's Stealth Suit. Giant's Amulet is going to give equipped creature +0/+1, and this creature has Hexproof as long as it's untapped. So we might have to keep Toxrill back in combat, but Toxrill is going to be doing more work outside of combat anyways. And then Mask of Avacyn is going to give equipped creature +1/+2 and Hexproof as well. Nurok's Stealth Suit is going to give equipped creature Shroud, and we can attach it at any time by just paying blue. Regardless, on top of Toxrill, we've got plenty of ways to deal with our opponent's things with cards like Alchemist Retrieval, Expel from Vraska, Ravenform, Into the Royal, Depart the Realm, Ingarrick's Wake, Aethergale, and Curse of the Swine. And now that we're going through lists of cards, let's talk about the ramp cards in this deck, starting with Everflowing Chalice, Ebony Fly, Mindstone, Liquid Torque, Fractured Power Stone, Charcoal Diamond, Sky Diamond, and Prismatic Lens. And because Toxrill costs a lot of mana, and well, Toxrill might get dealt with a couple of times, we've got even more ramp in this deck with cards like Urgolem's Eye, Sisay's Ring, Firebind Vessel, Hedron Archive, and Dreamstone Hedron. Yeah, a 7 mana commander can get quite pricey, especially when commander tax starts getting involved. So you might think we're done with ramp, but we're not quite done just yet because we're also running Heraldic Banner, Crowded Crypt, and Midnight Clock. Crowded Banner has when it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+0, and it can tap to add 1 mana of the chosen color. So this can pump our slugs and give them even more power. And then Crowded Crypt can tap for a black, and it also says whenever a creature controlled dies, put a corpse counter on Crowded Crypt. By paying 4 black, we can tap and sacrifice it to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed for each corpse counter on it. So this can be a mana rock that can also help us make even more creatures. And then Midnight Clock can tap for a blue, and by paying 2 and a blue, we put an hour counter on it. On top of that, at the beginning of each upkeep, we put an hour counter on Midnight Clock, and when the 12th hour counter is put on it, we shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library, then draw 7 cards, and we exile Midnight Clock. So this is a mana rock that can definitely help us refuel our hand and get our graveyard back into our library. But now that we've gone through every single non-land card in this deck, let's talk about the price. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, every single card outside the commander is less than $1. And yeah, even though Toxrill is like a $13 card or so, this deck is still decently budget. And keep in mind that that estimated cost of $47.55 also includes the cost of basic lands at 10 cents a piece, so if you already have those cards, there's some extra savings there. And speaking of extra savings, you might be able to save even more if you buy this deck on TCG Player and utilize heavily played and damaged cards because again, those cards need a home too. Though do keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.